Hi everyone, and welcome to the CCGPS Mathematics, a beginner's guide to number talks, starring Graham Fletcher. Take it away, Graham.
Excellent, Turtle. Well, I appreciate you being here today. I guess you're here because you want to help your students begin to develop strategies and become computationally fluent. And so on the behalf of your students all across the state, they want to tell you thank you even though they don't quite know it yet. First of all, I guess it's going to be really hard for us to talk about numbers when I can't really hear what you're saying. So bear in mind, it'll be me doing most of the talking here, but if you have any questions, you can always email your questions to the wiki, or you can contact the DOE. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you an equation, and what I'd like for you to do is go ahead and mentally solve or an expression. Go ahead and mentally solve this. What is 45% of 63? You got it? Well, actually, you don't really need it. What you probably felt was a little bit of anxiety that you just experienced, and to be honest, that's probably the first thing that your students are going to experience when you ask them to mentally solve numbers or solve a problem. The big thing here is that this is new for a lot of us because we weren't taught this way, and it's definitely going to be new for our students. But the big thing with Number Talks is we really want our students to develop the mental strategies that they'll be able to apply when working through problems. So here, let me give you a little bit of an easier one. Go ahead and mentally solve 85 plus 29.
Is that minus or plus?
Minus.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Turtle. 85 minus 29.
Okie dokie.
Do you have your answer, Turtle?
I do.
Excellent. How did you solve it?
Well, I thought, why don't I just take 85 minus 30? Which is a little easier for me, which gets me down to 55, but I didn't really subtract 30, I subtracted 29, so I put one more on, and that makes it 56.
Ah, excellent. I solved it a little bit different than what you did. I actually thought addition. I added 1 to the 29, and then I added another 50 to give me 80, and then I added 5 more. So that's how I came up with the same difference. See, we want our students to understand that sometimes they can think addition if they need to subtract. So here's some strategies that students in 2nd and 3rd grade are currently using. And as you can see in the top left corner, it is decomposing a number into place value, but they've actually used regrouping. Think addition, which is what I just used. Constant difference, and removal in parts. And as you start to employ Number Talks, these are the strategies that your students will begin to develop in the classroom. And once you see them thinking, it's so powerful. Just sit back and let them show you what they're doing.
Hey, Graham, I have a question for you. So
yeah.
I know that some teachers might look at this and they'll study this poster a little longer maybe than you or I might, because we've seen a lot of this before. And in that upper left quadrant where it's 70 plus 15 and then it's 20 minus 9, wouldn't that really be 20 plus 9? And then we're subtracting the 20 from the 70 and the 9 from the 15 to get the 50 plus 6?
It would be plus 9.
Okay, just in case somebody saw that and they were concerned and wondered what that meant. It's just a typo, and this happens all the time, and we figure it out, right? We just make sense of what would really make sense here, and what would really make sense is for that to be a plus sign. So mentally, give yourself permission to make that correction.
And that's great, and that's what will happen when you actually do a Number Talks. That's a really good catch, Turtle. This was done with a 5th grade student. When students are articulating their response, and what happens is the teacher's an actual recorder. The teacher's recording is students are able to go ahead and just correct mistakes as students are explaining their solution strategies. So what you just experienced there is what's going to happen in a Number Talk. So thanks, Turtle. That's a great catch. I missed that.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, is everybody being okay with sort of looking at each other's work. That's one of those SMPs, right, where we critique the work of others, but we're also willing to take that same sort of critique of our work as well. That's an important, comfortable place to be.
Right, and at the beginning it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but through time you definitely build comfort in constructing the viable arguments. And hey, it's math class. It's okay to disagree and let each other know, because all of us are better than one of us. I think I've heard some people say that before. So you might be asking, what is Number Talks? Well, in a nutshell, Number Talks is a short routine that's going to take place in your class for 5 to 15 minutes. And I know middle and high school teachers, that's a good thing, because a lot of the times you might only have about 60 minutes for a lesson. But to take 5 to 10 minutes out of every lesson and to do this with fidelity, that's what Number Talks is. You're just having your students use solution strategies to solve problems. It's a daily routine. And as I said, they're most effective when done every single day.
Right. So do we want to show them what it isn't?
Oh, I think we could show them what it isn't. We'll go back. This is what Number Talks isn't.
Okay. So smiley face when you've got the videogram and smiley face when it's over.
Okay.
I love that video. It's excruciating.
Yeah, it is, and every time I watch it, I think I've seen it 4 or 5 times, and every time I watch it, I can't help but laugh, because I know that I'm guilty. I'm that teacher. I've actually just tried to push my understanding onto students, and that's just a great example of what Number Talks isn't. But I'm definitely guilty of what we just saw.
Me too. And what's I think so excruciating for me is how completely these 2 little girls have internalized that situation so much that they can just completely spontaneously recreate it. And that's what I find so cringeworthy. So yeah, that's what it's not.
That's what it's not. But thankfully, we do have a video of later on of what it might look like, or what it could look like in a first class, and that's definitely refreshing after watching that. So you might be asking yourself a couple of these questions, and just to hit them at, I guess, the 60,000-foot view. Well, as mentioned before, the goal of Number Talks is for students to begin to develop computational fluency. The second question you might be asking is, well, what's the difference between computational fluency and memorization? Well, what happens to the student, well, I want to ask you this question, what happens to the student that only has memorized their facts? Well, the difference between memorization and computational fluency, well, memorization is they either know it or they don't know it. If a student is computationally fluent, they're able to have multiple strategies to find an answer. So a student who has, say, worked with Number Talks in terms of developing their addition, subtraction, multiplication facts, so we'll take multiplication. A student who has memorized 8 times 7, well, if they forget that 8 times 7 is 56, what strategies do they have to find the answer? Well, most students are going to have to go back and start counting from 1 or skip counting. A student who is computationally fluent, they would be able to say, well, I don't know what 8 times 7 is, but I do know that 8 times 8 is 64, and 64 minus 8 is 56. And that's the goal of Number Talks. We want our students to be able to develop computational fluency by being able to apply multiple strategies, because we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. We can't use one strategy for every problem that we ever encounter. The third question is, well, hey, we're talking about facts. Why not use flashcards? Or when should they be used? See, the thing with flashcards is, for years we've been saying don't use flashcards. Well, we want to be careful about saying that. Flashcards are okay, but, and I want to make sure that there's a definite disclaimer here, is they need to be used for purposeful practice. So for instance, if you're in a 3rd grade class or 2nd grade class and you're beginning to build arrays, or 3rd grade, and you're starting to work on your 2 times tables, or on your facts of 2, you can pull out the facts. You can pull out your flashcards for those, but only pull out the fact cards that have factors of 2. That way it becomes purposeful. The thing here is students can only become quicker at things that they've already developed. So once students have developed the strategies for their 2 facts or 3 facts, then it's okay to start using flashcards. But make sure that it's purposeful practice. And Van de Waal definitely talks a lot about that. So you might be asking, how does it connect to CCGPS? How does it connect to the Standards for Mathematical Practice? Well, Number Talks. I want you to take a minute, take a look at the slide. And you haven't quite seen it, but can you pick which one of these would tie to Number Talks? Turtle, and if you want to chime in here.
Well, I'll tell you, you're asking me which one will tie to Number Talks. I'm having a harder time figuring out which one wouldn't. They all, I can see a way in which every one of these occurs in Number Talks. I know we discussed a little bit about modeling with mathematics, and so if you want to elaborate a bit on what our consensus was on how that manifests in Number Talks, because that's the only one that you might have trouble stretching to fit the Number Talks scenario, but all the rest of them fit.
Yeah, that was a great point, because we briefly did talk about it, and at first I was thinking, well, modeling, and in my head I was thinking about the concrete manipulatives, or students being able to use a table, because tables are that sense of modeling, or the use of equations, as it says here, creating a number line. These are all models. But in reality, through Number Talks, what students will say is, well, in my head I pictured a number line. And that's what's beautiful about Number Talks. Number Talks allows you to assess as a teacher, hey, is your student, or is a student able to internalize structure? Are they able to model mentally in their head and be able to articulate what they're saying? So after our discussion, we were saying definitely modeling at first, but it made me think, but I definitely can see now how modeling does connect. It's all about students internalizing their understanding.
Yep. So those organizational strategies now live inside their head. They've internalized it. That's absolutely right. The other part, putting mathematics in the context of real-world situations and identifying the relationships, that one's a little tougher to draw the line between, but we'll set that aside for the moment and instead think about those internalized organizational strategies and structures.
Right. And you might be saying, well, how does this tie and make look for number 7, look for and make use of structure? And you'll see we'll talk about purposely selecting problems. And the way we use number strings, which we'll talk about a little bit more, is number strings allow students to see the structure in numbers and build off of one another. So yeah, all 8 of them can tie to Number Talks. So in terms of bang for your buck, why not use it now?
Right, absolutely.
So just a brief little overview here in terms of what does Number Talks look like. Well, it has students communicating about the numbers. It has them clarifying their own thinking. And a big thing with this is that it allows students to listen to each other's strategies, and they value each other's opinions or thinking. They're able to listen to how each other are talking and able to critique each other's thinking. And it also, as just mentioned, it gives the teacher an opportunity to hear what students are thinking. And a lot of the times we see that students aren't able to articulate what they're thinking, but that might be just because they've not had that opportunity to practice. So know that in the upcoming years, you should have students that are coming to you that have used Number Talks before. And if not, and you're using them, say you're in 6th grade, and you see that students are coming to you and they haven't used Number Talks, and you see the benefit of them, hey, why not go have a conversation with a 5th grade teacher? I'm sure they'd really enjoy it, because then their students would see the benefit of it. As we said before, it's all mental math here. The big thing is that all the teacher is doing is recording what the student's saying. The teacher's not making sense or trying to clarify the student's thinking. It's the students making all the strategy in their head and being able to share their thinking. But again, it's all mental. Now you see here, I guess the third point down is it talks about students are given thinking time. A lot of the times we want to jump in and rescue students too quickly, because as our nurturer, that's why we're educators. We like to help students. The big part here is giving students the time to think about their answer. And while students are thinking about their answer, what they're going to do is they're going to use a thumb, and they're going to hold that thumb they're going to hold their fist, a clenched fist, right close to their chest. And as they have multiple strategies to solve a problem, they're going to show with their fingers or with their thumb. So if a student has one strategy to solve the problem, they'll use their thumb to show one. They'll show two fingers if they have two strategies to solve the same problem, and so on and so on. And what this does is, I remember that when I was in elementary school, or even in high school for that matter, is there would always be one or two students that would always raise their hand as soon as the teacher asked a question. And then I was relieved because I knew the teacher wouldn't call on me. I knew my classmates would rescue me. But what this does is it allows everybody that quiet think time to come up with their answer. So you'll see in the video here, you'll see students are really quiet, but watch for their hands. They're letting you know how many different strategies they have to solve the problem. And as mentioned before, the teacher, all you're doing is you're just recording the students' thinking, and you're providing a visual to look at for the students to refer back to. Anything you wanted to add in there, Turtle?
And what's kind of
Pardon
cool,
me?
Graham? Oh, yeah, I did. Sorry, I jumped right on top of you. So, yeah, what's really cool is that classrooms begin to develop their own additions to the thumbs up signal. And as Graham was talking about, kids will learn to put out a finger for each strategy. So you'll see their thumb is up, and then they'll have three fingers out as well, and that means they have 4 strategies in total. Or one teacher talked about that her students, if they're really excited, and they would be waving their hands if their hands were allowed to rise above where they're situated on their chest, instead of the waving hand, which is a distractor and a thought interrupter for every other kid, they instead scratch themselves. They use their fingers like they're scratching themselves because they're itching to give the answer, and that gives an outlet for that same behavior, but it doesn't distract anyone else. And so I thought that was kind of a funny variation on the theme of thumbs up.
I love it. And I love how that teacher saw that she needed to use that, employ that strategy, because her students were just wanting to scream out the answer. So that's great. And that teacher took it, and she's gone off with it. And now because she shared it, there's going to be more teachers that are itching to use that strategy.
And there's also this wonderful unintended, I guess, maybe it's intended, I don't know, but a lovely consequence of doing number talks with kids is that there's some real equity that starts to happen within your class, and there's also some respect for each other's thinking. Students begin to quickly realize that folks that they had discounted before as not really being mathematicians or mathy people have these amazing strategies when they've been given time to think and when they are allowed an opportunity to share. And that's exactly what Number Talks does. So it's a great equity builder in your classroom, and it's also a great humility builder. So it's a lovely multi-purpose way beyond mathematics.
Yeah, and that's a great point to bring up, because a lot of the times our gifted students are able to get the answer right away. They're able to automatize an answer, but they can't verbalize how they had that answer. But what they'll see is a lot of sometimes what quote-unquote struggling students are able to, given the time, that thought process time, they're able to come up with an answer and are able to verbalize. So they're actually gaining respect with their classmates as well, with just like what you said. So it's Number Talks is kind of like the equalizer within your classroom.
Love it.
So purposeful problems. The thing is with Number Talks, you just don't want to go ahead and just write up any random problems. And if you've never heard of what a number string is that's what a Number Talk is. The numbers will start when they're small, so students can begin to focus on the strategies instead of getting lost in the numbers. And on this next slide here is a great example of what a number string is. And the thing here is that each problem is actually tied to one another. So what I want you to do here is, and Turtle's actually just dropped it in the chat box there. A lot of the Number Talks book that we're talking about here doesn't so much extend, it talks about whole numbers. But if you go to the website that Turtle just put in the chat box, numberstrings.com, this is a treasure trove of amazing number strings for decimals and fractions. So it goes beyond whole numbers, and it's just really, really good stuff. And then there's an also website here is, hey, if you can't get to the book, check out this SchoolWires website here. Lots of good number strings for whole numbers are identified on there, and I think decimals and fractions are also going to be included on that in the upcoming future. But take a look at this purposeful number string. What do you recognize? What do you notice? Turtle, what do you see?
Number 9. Number 9.
No.
Sorry, that's an old Beatles reference that you may not be old enough to
I'll
get,
go
Graham.
look it up as soon as we're done the webinar, and I'll be able to sing it as well. Next time we can sing it together. So, but here's a question for you. What do you notice about these questions and that 9-ness that you've seen there, Turtle?
Well, every one of these problems has a 9 at the end, at the tail end of one of the numbers, and so that makes me immediately think of friendly numbers making 10. And so for me, my strategy with this would be to look at the number with the 9, bring it up to a 10, add them together, and then take one away to compensate for that one that I added into the 10. So that's immediately helping me to understand as a student the value of thinking as 9 is in proximity to the next 10.
Awesome. And you can see, as we talked about before, is it starts off with smaller numbers. So by starting with smaller numbers, is what it does is it allows the students to get comfortable, and then they increase in terms of complexity or relative size and quantity, but the student is still able to apply the same strategy. And you can see how a student here could go from 7 plus 19 all the way to 29 plus 33. And this is what a purposeful number string is. So if you've never seen a number string, now you know what a number string is. And if you're a kindergarten teacher and you thought about making a 10 strategy, or you know to make a 10 strategy, and you're able to make that connection with the number 9, go ahead and go ahead and kiss your brain.
Yay!
So, looking at K2 number talks, we want our students to move from being subitizers, perceptual subitizers, and conceptual subitizers. Now, if you're in the upper grades, you might be wondering, wait a minute, suba what? Well, you might not know it, but you're actually able to subitize. If you were to, subitizing is the ability to be able to recognize a quantity of dots up to 5 without counting them. So if you were to look at the dots in the lower left-hand corner, you see 5 and 3, and you wouldn't necessarily need to count that 5 and 3 to see 8. You would just look at it and you'd be able to automatize that answer. And this is what is at the root of number talks in terms of kindergarten and second grade. So what's the difference? Turtle, do you know the difference between a perceptual and conceptual subitizer, or should I help you out there?
I really want your help, Graham, because this was something that I learned through listening to you, actually, about perceptual and conceptual subitization. So make me smarter.
Excellent. I'm glad I could help you out. Well, what a perceptual subitizer is if you look at the two 10 frames, this is for the upper grades, this is what we call a double 10 frame. And if you look at all the dots there, how many dots do you see? And a perceptual subitizer, what they're going to say is, well, I see 12 dots. And we'd say, well, how do you see 12 dots? And the student would just say, I don't know, I just see 12 dots. And at the beginning, that's how our students begin to subitize. But what a conceptual subitizer is able to do is they're able to articulate how they see the 12 dots. So by looking at this, a student would be able to say, well, I see 12 dots. How do you see 12 dots? And the conceptual subitizer would say, well, I see a group of 10 and 2 more, or I see 2 groups of 5, which is 10, and 2 more is 12. That's the difference. But without using number talks, we're never going to allow our students to move from the perceptual understanding to the conceptual understanding, and that's the difference.
And the other important part of that is we'll never know either if we don't use number talks and listen to how they see things.
Right, and it comes back to just really wanting to know what your students know. And if we don't ever give our students the opportunity to share, then hey, we might never find out.
So this is a formative assessment.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we're talking about kindergarten, second grade, hey, can your students subitize or can they count 1 to 1? Do they have cardinality? There's so many different things here in the lower grades. And you know what? Frankly, I've actually done subitizing with middle grades and turned it into a game. And we even have 14 and 15-year-olds that love to do it. And I guess some teachers like to do it as well, because I know I do.
Absolutely, and what's happening is for those folks who were never given the opportunity to think about quantity of things that can be broken apart, the dot cards and tin frames and Reckon Recs suddenly provide that visuals that you can internalize even as an adult. If you never learned this way, start doing it with your kids. You're going to be amazed at what you see.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. So, we were just talking about the number 12, and if I asked you, what do you know about the number 12, you might say, well, it's a 10 and a 2. But because we've allowed our students and given them the opportunity to explore the number 12, this is what a group of first grade students came up. These are all the different things how they see and can connect to the number 12. Lots of different ideas happening. The big thing here is that students see the number 12 and they're making connections and they're able to explain it. And this is from Ms. Burge in Henry County. So thank you very much, Ms. Burge, for sharing this with us.
And Graham, I just have to bring up how many mathematical connections there are on this page. Things that aren't even in the first grade standards are appearing here. And guess what? That's awesome. That's okay. You're building understanding with these kids that they're going to have as foundations for later on. So absolutely, if your kids make these kinds of observations, record them and honor them. It's just beautiful stuff. So much going on here. People need to take a minute to look at this, pause the recording, and have a look at all the mathematical ideas going on right here.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, even if, you know, middle school, high school, put the number 12 up on the board and just see what your students can come up with. At first they're going to look at you like you're crazy, but then once they get the idea of just making connections, it actually becomes quite exciting. I've done this with 4th and 5th grade students before, and what they come up, it really gives you good insight to what they know.
And it makes them better at their basic mathematical manipulations when they do stuff like this, even at 4th and 5th grade.
Absolutely. So yeah, feel free to pause and keep looking at it, but we're going to keep on moving on. So we were just talking about first grade, and what a standard in first grade is that students need to be able to add and subtract within 20, demonstrating fluency for addition and subtraction. And at the root of this standard, students need to be able to use multiple strategies to add and subtract within 20. So as you take a look at it, there might be some strategies here that you're not familiar with, but a couple of them are, I think, Turtle, you mentioned it before, was making a 10. A lot of this is part-whole thinking, and what that is that students are able to look at the whole quantity and able to manipulate the numbers however they need to be manipulated in order to make them accessible for them to apply a strategy. So we have a little video here of a first grade class, and if you're in middle school or high school, put this question up on the board and see how your students would actually solve it, and it would be eye-opening. But then again, hey, we haven't quite given our students to explain their thinking, so just remember this is a first grade class. I think it was in October or January of their first grade year.
Okay, and once again, I'll push it out, but I'll need a smiley face for when you're done viewing. And if it pushes out to you, a smiley face. So a smiley face at the beginning, smiley face at the end.
Okay.
Love that video, Graham. You did a great job with that number talk.
Yeah, I was actually, when I did it, I was tickled because I only thought that we would get 2 strategies out of them, and this teacher had only been using number talks for about 2 months. So the one time I showed, we had done number talks for a week, and then I went on to different classrooms to go and talk to them about number talks. When I came back, I was just floored with the development in terms of strategy that students had been able to do in 2 weeks. So we just have to expose them.
Amazing.
So, but if you notice there were 3 different strategies using, and the good thing that I loved about that is that the students were able to identify what strategy they were using. So the students used counting on, another student used 8 plus 8 minus 1 where he gave away the candy, so he used near doubles, and then the last student there that you saw, well, she's used a strategy that we've talked a lot about in this webinar, and that's making a 10. And when she did the making a 10, I found it really funny because my brain wants to take 2 from the 7 and give it to the 8. But that didn't make sense to her. She wanted to take 3 from the 8 and give it to the 7. Is it both right? Yes. But it's how she wanted to make sense of the numbers. So by just giving them the opportunity to share, it was that video alone is worth its weight in gold, that students can really think when given the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It's a winner.
So what you see here is, this is a cheat sheet that we have that we've kind of shared, and we pushed it out at the beginning. Now you wouldn't give this to your students because the strategies that you want to develop in number talks is these are student strategies. We don't want to tell the students, okay, today we're going to be making a 10 strategy and go and show the students how to do that. We want the students to be able to develop those strategies. But what I would do is I would take a look at the sheets that we pushed out. They're included here. But this might be something to share with your parents, because there's nothing more frustrating than going and building conceptual understanding with your students to send them home and the parent undoes everything. Parents don't want to harm their students. They only want to help their own children. So the more that we can educate parents, and this simple form here that we've sent out to our parents has really helped educate parents in terms of how we can allow our students to reason with numbers and think flexibly. And actually parents like thinking about numbers this way, but they're like me and you, Turtle, we were never taught numbers this way. We've learned it later on in life. So what could this look like in 3rd through 8th grade? Well, as we've talked about it briefly, is we can make that connection to multiplication and division. We can talk about decimals. Well, how does this tie to decimals? Well, when students are learning to decompose numbers into place value, that strategy, or adding up in chunks, these are strategies that work for whole numbers, and they can immediately be applied to decimal numbers as well. And as we pushed out before, that Number Talks, the Number Strings website, such a great website. If you do anything after today, even if you go in your middle school, just go check out that website and see some of the number strings and just throw one up to your students and see how they do it.
And frankly, Graham, I'm going to say that this kind of thinking and this technique in classrooms could extend all the way up into high school. I think high school teachers would be surprised to find that, well, maybe they wouldn't be surprised to find that their students really lack number sense, and number talks are a great way to develop that number sense. You can bill it as just a wake up at the beginning of class, and kids will think they're super simple and easy, but just like we've discovered with adults, kids really, high school kids even, really enjoy stretching and trying to come up with as many ways as possible to solve problems. And if you look on the internet, you can find strings that apply to high school and number talks that apply to high school. So they're out there.
Absolutely, and you just got me thinking there is a lot of the procedural and algorithmic thinking that we were taught when we were being raised, is it focuses not so much on place value, but it focuses on the digit. And the great thing about Number Talks is what it allows students to do is manipulate quantities. Now when students see a number or a number like 176, they understand that that's not just a 1, a 7, and a 6. They look at that as a quantity of something to where they can take it apart and manipulate it. And that's the great thing. So yeah, definitely, this ties all the way. It'd be interesting to see if any university professors might want to jump on board and try Number Talks.
That'd be a fun one to try. I wonder if there's anybody out there that we could both think of who might be willing to do this with their students. Oh well, all right.
So we just shared the addition and subtraction, and we're just sharing the multiplication and division strategies. And again, these aren't strategies that we want to just give to our students and say, I want you to learn all these and come back tomorrow. These are strategies that students develop through Number Talks. So we pushed it out. Hopefully you'll be able to use it and share it with your parents. And actually, it might actually help you see some extra strategies that you can begin to shift your students' thinking towards. But again, we don't want to tell our students this is how they do the problem. These strategies just might make numbers more accessible to students.
I loved doubling and halving when I realized how beautifully that worked. But that's another Number Talk for another day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, such a great strategy, definitely. So the student accountability is, you can see in the video, students are using their hand signals. So if students aren't using hand signals as a teacher, hey, I know who's participating and who's not participating. Keeping records of the problem, you can take a picture of a Number Talk and post it on your website for parents to see or for students to go back and look at. And you might say the first time you're doing it, well, I'm not sure if I can do this whole group. Go ahead and do it in a small group. The big thing here is that Make Number Talks, it's such a powerful technique for building numeracy in your students, is use it however it fits in your class. There's no one size fits all. It's just great, and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to know what it is and that you get to start trying it out with your students. So you might be asking, well, how else does this connect to a class? And thank you very much to Ms. Shelley Birch, another teacher from Henry County. She shared this, and this is something that she did with her 3rd grade students. And what Ms. Birch did is she would put up one problem for doing Number Talks for an entire week. She would put one problem up on the board, and as a group, students would sit and collaborate and put on chart paper all the different ways that they could solve this problem. And a big thing with Number Talks is that we haven't talked about today is students need to identify the most efficient strategy, because we want our students to become efficient thinkers. So what students do here is they look at all the different ways that they've been able to solve the problem, and then they identify which strategy is the most efficient. Really, really good stuff. And again, thanks, Ms. Birch, for sharing and sending this in to us. So starting Number Talks in your classroom, think about where your students might be weak in and start with that in mind, but remember to start with smaller problems and be able to build up. Be prepared to offer strategies. So if your students are stuck, then it's okay to go back, put that on the back burner, and go back and maybe use numbers that are smaller or a little bit more accessible to students. And a lot of times what you might find if you have been doing Number Talks, you might have a student that's using a strategy and going off on a completely different tangent. But what we can say is, hey, you know what, I really like your thinking, but I might need you to explain that a little bit more to me. Can I talk to you about this when we're done Number Talks? That way we're still honoring students' think time and their mathematical thinking. We're not shutting down their idea and saying, no, that's wrong. So even if a student's going on a back burner, even if a student has an idea that's going off on a tangent, just say, hey, you know what, let's table that for a minute. And you want to do them for no longer than 15 minutes. And you want to make sure that you're only asking questions and you're not clarifying students' thinking. So just a couple little tidbits to get Number Talks started in your classroom. And Turtle, did you want to talk about this page here?
No, what we've done is pulled in, first of all, the Number Talks book, and you may not have the book, and that's fine because there are so many places that you can go to find resources to help you out in addition to this webinar. And remember, this webinar is just a toe in the water. This is certainly not the be-all, end-all. This is the baby step. So what we want to do, though, is share with you that there are multiple places to learn more, and that's what we encourage you to do. Another really cool thing to do once you've begun using Number Talks in your classroom is to begin sharing the outcomes that you have with your colleagues so that they can begin to see the power of Number Talks, and you can share with each other the kinds of strategies that are developing and encourage each other and help each other to become better at Number Talks. You know, it might be a nice thing if, let's say, you're assigned to kick off a faculty meeting. How about doing a Number Talks with your a Number Talk with your colleagues at the beginning of a staff meeting every time you meet, or at the beginning of your grade level collaboration? It's a great way to stretch teacher thinking too. And I've just put all the links in the chat window so that you can retrieve them there and click right through and open those windows up and explore them right after this webinar. Here they are again. All these resources are available to you without any pennies being involved. They're all free for the taking. And then also there's one more that I want to share with you. And Fletcher, I just got to thank you again for contributing. I know that you are largely responsible for this session, and I am delighted to have your voice because you keep it real. You keep it at the classroom level. You're in the classrooms every day, working with kids and working with teachers. So when you speak, it's the voice of authority, and I really appreciate you being an authority. And if you didn't get quite enough of Fletcher this time around, well, I just put his blog in the chat window. He has a really interesting, very provocative blog in the sense that it really makes you think differently about what you're doing in math class, or at least pushes the boundaries of what you might want to try to do. So thanks a million, Graham, and just know that my gratitude is endless. So I really appreciate it, and couldn't do it without you. So,
no problem. Glad I could help out. I just see the power in Number Talks. So yeah, I just wanted to share the love and get it out there to everybody. And as you said, hey, it's free, so why not try it? What do you have to lose, right?
Right on. So keep on fighting the good fight. Graham, I'll do the same at my end, and I'll be talking to you soon. But take care, everybody, and go out and do those Number Talks. And if you need a little more support, go to the wiki. You can absolutely ask questions there, or you can email me. And, you know, Graham would probably talk to you on his blog if you went there and left a comment or two. He'd probably be glad to write a whole blog post on Number Talks to augment what we just did. No pressure, Graham. All right, everybody have a great day, and we'll see you soon.